Many years ago, I became a bartender, and at this bar, I was the first woman of color, period, to ever work in this place. So it was going through a lot of changes. I had just moved to this town. I didn't really know anything about it, me and my husband at that time. And so my husband, he had ended up getting a job at this bar. And I went to this bar for a lot of reasons. Um, but it wasn't to go there. But when I went there, I met the person who me and my husband actually went to school with. He had married the owner's daughter. And so soon after, he gave me a job there. That was the first time I ever bartended. I didn't know. And this is where it comes into where it's not what you know, it's who you know. That's how I got the job bartending. And I moved to this town and everything. So I remember people telling me before I actually got the job, they was like, well, how did you get in there? I was like, what do you mean? And it was like, how did you go in? I said, I walked through the front door. And I was looking straight up because I didn't understand what they were talking about. And they was like, you're not supposed to go through the front. And I said, who told you that? And they looked at me like I'm crazy. And so after I would go in there, I remember these two guys came in after me and they stood at the door. These men were black and they looking around like somebody's gonna, stop them and all this kind of stuff. And they came in and just like, you know, went around. So after a while, and the type of bar I worked at, even though it was from a small town, you would have like truckers come in from up north. It was all over the United States. These people come from. I met people from Miami, from California. You get the point. New York. I mean, they was freaking from everywhere, and they would come in this place. And so it got back to the NAACP that it was a segregated bar, and so NAACP came, and I remember them talking to me about it, and they was like, do you only work in the back? And I'm like, and I know these people looked at me like I was crazy, and the thing is, I was not from that town. I did not know anything that was going on, and I was like, I serve both. I'm in the front and I'm in the back, and yes, of course I asked questions, but and they just looked, and it was like, you do know this bar is segregated. I'm like, that's what they say, but I work in the front and I work, I do both, like front, back, because the back, it was kind of like it had a wall, but it had like to where the bar would run to the back as well, to where you could go from the front and back. And but it didn't have an access on this side, so it would have like a door on the back. And so me personally, really, I really didn't think about it because when I moved to this town, you got to understand, I came from being around a whole bunch of different people, whether they were Hispanic, Asian, like all this stuff. I was so used to being around other cultures of people. I knew when I moved to this place, it was a culture shock because it was only like black and white people. And I remember telling them, like, I feel like I've moved back to the 50s or 60s because you got to understand, like, how wrong this feels. But to them, it was normal because that was their way of life. It was not mine. But anyway, I was working this place or whatever, but I'm getting to the point. But anyway, they end up knocking down the wall and all this kind of stuff. And so that's where it got conjoined. But anyway, sometime later, and I remember working there to where from the next town over, it was called a sundown town. Again, I didn't know anything about this until the people from that town explained to me what it was because I had no clue. I never heard of it. And so they told me about it. But anyway, the point I'm getting to and I'm about to is to where it's particular to where when I first started working there, people did not want me to wait on them or anything. Because like I said, I was the first woman of color to ever, and person of color to ever be in there and also work in that place. They didn't trust me or anything. And honestly, I couldn't really understand that. I was young at the time. I did not get it. And so I just kept on like being me, like doing like whatever. And I was coming out of situation where I was basically in the agoraphobic, and what I'm saying, I was real like kind of like standoffish at first, but then I started like getting into things. But anyway, I was there for, I don't know, at this point in time for a while, but I remember there were certain people in and out and in and out. But I remember this Halloween in particular. This guy walked in and he had on his KKK outfit, that was fresh out of his closet, you could tell. And his wife was dressed like Angie Bomo, basically. And I remember I was standing by the window, smoking a cigarette at the time. And when they walked in, everybody just be quiet. Like it just shut down, like the whole atmosphere changed. So I looked. And when I looked, I turned my head back outside and looked back out the window and continued smoking. And everybody was just staring at me. I didn't say anything. Everybody was just staring at me. So I walked up and this other girl said, she's like, hey, I'll get them if you want me to. I said, no, 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 I got it. Don't worry about it. I got it. So I walked up to them, I asked them what exactly they wanted to drink. They told me. And it was like an all eyes on me type situation. So I gave them what they want to drink, went back to the window, started smoking. Um, and everybody, I could tell like the whole environment. And it wasn't the fact that what he wore, was the fact that they didn't want him wearing that in public. And I want to make that plain. That's exactly what it was, because I put two and two together. I put two and two about who he was around without the outfit on, the costume. You get what I'm saying? So I put two and two together who all was in the clan. Just put it like that. It it's a no-brainer. But hey, it is what it is. Stuff like that just never affected me. But anywho, um, I remember after this time. Now I'm gonna fast forward. After this time, some time went on. I don't know exactly how long it was, but I know that same man, he came back in, and this time it was like hardly anybody in there at the time. It was probably like, I don't know, probably like 7, 8 o'clock at night. It wasn't really really busy, and this time he had somebody to help him to the bar. And so I served him. I'd never treated him wrong or different or whatever. And he came to me, and the first thing he said, I want to apologize to you. I said, oh. He said, yeah. He said, I am so sorry for how I treated you, how I disrespected you. He said, you haven't seen me in here for a while. He said, because I got in a bad car accident and I lost my sight. He said, I lost all my friends. My wife even left me and everything. And he said, I just kept thinking about like how I treated you, what I did. And and he was like, can you forgive me? I said, yeah, I forgive you. And so he started like feeling around for some pictures. He was showing me some type of pictures that he had taken and all this kind of stuff. And then he asked me, he was like, would I want to go out on a date with him? And I said, absolutely not. I said, I forgive him. I said, but what you did, I said, you got to understand what you did. I said, if this version of you would have came to me before, I said, actually, I would have went on a date with you. I said, because that's just who I am. I like learning about people. I like getting to know people. I said, but I met the other version of you, that true you, that self. And I said, and it's just a shame that you had to become blind in order to see.